The weathered cowboy's hand froze mid-reach for his water canteen when he spotted the trembling girl clutching a silver locket, the exact one he'd crafted for his lost wife years before she vanished. The townsfolk see him as another worthless drifter, spitting tobacco juice as he passes, whispering that colored cowboys like him should keep riding until they find the rope waiting down the road. They assume he'll be run out by sundown, just another forgotten soul with nowhere to belong. But this small girl, dismissed by everyone as a street orphan, holds the impossible, a piece of his shattered past that should be buried with the dead. The locket connects them to a woman whose disappearance destroyed one life and shaped another, carrying secrets that could restore everything or damn them both. Will he walk away from the painful truth, or will uncovering it destroy what little peace he's found? The dust cloud kicked up by Judah Ledger's horse settled as he rode into Millfield Creek. The Arizona Territory sun beat down mercilessly on the weathered black cowboy's shoulders. His horse needed water. His supplies had run dangerously low 3 days back. The general store sat at the town's heart like a crooked tooth. Judah dismounted and tied his reins to the hitching post. The wooden boards creaked under his boots as he stepped onto the porch. The store owner's face twisted when Judah pushed through the door. A heavy-set man with graying whiskers looked up from his ledger book. His eyes narrowed to slits. "We don't serve your kind here." Judah's jaw tightened. He'd heard those words in a dozen towns before this one. The man's hand moved closer to something beneath the counter. Judah backed toward the door without turning around. "Just needed supplies, nothing more. Find them somewhere else." The door slammed behind him with enough force to rattle the windows. 3 men on the porch stared at him with open hostility. One spat tobacco juice dangerously close to Judah's boots. "You lost, boy." Judah untied his horse without responding. The men's laughter followed him down the street like hungry vultures. He'd faced this reception before. Towns like Millfield Creek had one rule for men who looked like him: keep moving or face the consequences. The sheriff emerged from his office as Judah passed, a tall man with a badge that caught the sunlight like a warning. His hand rested on his gun belt with practiced ease. "You planning on staying long?" "Just passing through." "Good. We like to keep things peaceful around here." The message rang clear as church bells. Judah nodded once and continued down the dusty main street. His horse's hooves echoed against the hard-packed earth. Store windows reflected his image back at him, a lone rider with nowhere to go and no welcome waiting. Then he saw her. The small girl sat in the narrow alley between the barber shop and the bank. Her dark skin marked her as an outcast just like him. Her clothes hung in tatters. Dirt streaked her face like war paint. But something around her neck caught the light. Judah's breath caught in his throat. The silver locket gleamed against her chest. Intricate engravings covered its surface in patterns he knew by heart. His own hands had carved every delicate line. His own tools had shaped the metal into something beautiful enough for the woman he'd loved. The woman who died 5 years ago. His horse stopped without command. Judah stared at the impossible sight before him. The locket he'd crafted during long winter nights. The one he'd given Catherine on their wedding day. The same one that should be buried with her bones somewhere along the Colorado River. The girl looked up at his approach. Her eyes held intelligence far beyond her years. She couldn't be more than 8 or 9, but something in her gaze suggested wisdom earned through hardship. "That's a beautiful locket." She touched the silver protectively. Her small fingers traced the engravings with familiar affection. "My mama gave it to me before she went to heaven." Judah's heart hammered against his ribs. He dismounted slowly, keeping his movements gentle. The girl watched him with cautious curiosity rather than fear. "What was your mama's name?" "Catherine." The word hit him like a physical blow. Judah steadied himself against his horse's flank. The ground seemed to shift beneath his feet. "Would you mind if I looked at that locket? Just for a moment?" The girl studied his face carefully. Whatever she saw there must have convinced her. She lifted the chain over her head and placed it in his trembling hands. The locket opened with a soft click. Inside, 2 photographs stared back at him. Catherine's beautiful face smiled from the left side. His own younger self looked out from the right. Impossible. Catherine had drowned when their wagon overturned crossing the swollen river. He'd searched for days before giving up hope. Her body had never been found, but no one could survive those rapids. Where did you get this? I told you. Mama gave it to me. But Catherine died years ago. The girl shook her head with absolute certainty. Mama died last month from the fever. She told me stories about the man in the locket. She said his name was Judah. The locket slipped from his numb fingers. It landed in the dust between them like a fallen star. The girl picked it up and brushed it clean with tender care. She said if anything happened to her, I should find you. She said you'd know what to do. Judah's mind reeled. Catherine alive all these years, living somewhere with this child, building a life he knew nothing about. The guilt he'd carried like stones in his chest suddenly felt heavier than mountains. The store owner appeared at the mouth of the alley, his face twisted with disgust when he spotted them together. Get away from that girl, Drifter. She's got nothing you want. But he was wrong. She had everything. If you are enjoying this story of how a simple locket can change two lonely souls forever, don't forget to comment where you are tuning in from to show how this story can connect us across any distances, backgrounds, and hearts. Because what will happen in the next 15 minutes in Millfield Creek will completely change everything these two outcasts thought they knew about family, fortune, and the dangerous secrets that some people will kill to keep buried. The girl reached into her tattered dress and pulled out a small leather pouch. Her movements were careful, practiced. She'd been protecting these contents for weeks. Mama said to give you these if I ever found you. Judah watched as she unfolded several yellow documents. His hands shook as he recognized Catherine's precise handwriting across the top page. Legal papers, bank certificates, land deeds stamped with official seals. The numbers didn't make sense at first. Then they hit him like a lightning strike. Catherine had owned 12,000 acres of prime grazing land. 3 separate bank accounts held enough money to buy half the territory. Cattle brands registered in her name numbered in the hundreds. His dead wife had been one of the wealthiest landowners in Arizona. How is this possible? Esperanza folded the papers carefully back into the pouch. Her movements showed she understood their value even if she couldn't read all the words. Mama ran cattle through the hidden valley. Men would come buy them and take them to market. She never left our home, but the money kept coming. Judah's mind struggled to process this revelation. Catherine had survived the river crossing. She'd built an empire while he wandered from town to town carrying guilt like a disease. The final document stopped his heart cold. A will, written in Catherine's hand, witnessed and notarized. Every acre, every dollar, every head of cattle left to one person, Esperanza. This 8-year-old girl sitting in the dirt was worth more money than most men would see in 10 lifetimes. She was one of the richest people in the entire territory. Do you understand what this means? Mama said the papers would help me find a home. She said you'd know how to use them. The cruel irony struck him immediately. A young girl with enough wealth to buy respect and power. But her skin color and age made her powerless to claim any of it. The law required a male guardian to manage such assets. Without protection, the inheritance would vanish into the pockets of corrupt officials. Footsteps approached from the main street. Silas Whitmore rounded the corner with the measured stride of a man who controlled everything around him. The banker's expensive suit and gold watch chain marked him as the most powerful person in Millfield Creek. His pale eyes locked onto the documents in Judah's hands. What do we have here? Judah quickly folded the papers, but not quickly enough. Whitmore had seen the official seals and legal formatting. His banker's instincts recognized valuable assets from 50 feet away. Just some old papers, nothing important. I find that hard to believe. Perhaps I should examine them to ensure they're authentic. Whitmore's tone carried the authority of a man accustomed to getting his way. His hand extended toward the documents with casual presumption. Judah stepped protectively in front of Esperanza. They belong to the girl. A child can't own legal documents of any significance. If there are assets involved, they require proper adult supervision. The banker's smile never reached his eyes. Behind the friendly facade lurked the calculating mind of a predator. He'd built his fortune by acquiring distressed properties at fraction of their value. The territorial law is quite clear on such matters. Orphaned children cannot hold significant assets without appointed guardianship. The court usually assigns such responsibilities to established local businessmen. Like himself, Judah saw the trap closing around them. Whitmore would petition the court to become Esperanza's guardian. He'd control her inheritance while she remained powerless. Within months, the assets would transfer to his name through legal manipulation. She's not orphaned. I'm her guardian. The lie came easily. Protecting Esperanza felt more natural than breathing. Whitmore's eyes narrowed. His friendly mask slipped slightly. You just rode into town today. You have no legal standing whatsoever. I'm family. Prove it. Judah held up the locket. The photographs inside told a story that even Whitmore couldn't dispute. Her mother was my wife. Was being the operative term. A dead woman cannot designate guardianship. Esperanza spoke for the first time since the banker arrived. She's not dead. She died last month. There are papers. Whitmore's attention shifted to her like a hawk spotting prey. His mental calculations accelerated as he processed this new information. What kind of papers? Legal ones. With seals. Judah watched Whitmore's demeanor change completely. The casual predator became intensely focused. Big money was involved. Possibly very big money. I think we should continue this conversation in my office, where we can examine these documents properly. It wasn't a request. The girl needs food and rest first. Of course, Mrs. Henderson runs a boarding house down the street, very reasonable rates. Whitmore was already planning. Give them basic hospitality while he researched the legal angles. Find ways to challenge their claims. Identify weaknesses he could exploit. Judah recognized the game. He'd seen it played against desperate people in every territory town. The powerful preyed on the vulnerable through manipulation of laws designed to protect them. But this time felt different. This time he wouldn't run. Catherine had trusted him with her most precious gift. Esperanza represented everything good he'd lost through his own cowardice. She deserved better than the fate awaiting orphaned children with valuable assets. The banker extended his hand toward Esperanza with false kindness. Come along, child. Let's get you properly settled. Judah stepped between them again. She stays with me. I'm afraid that's not how things work around here. The threat hung in the desert air like smoke from a distant fire. Whitmore controlled the town through money and influence. He could make their lives impossible with a few whispered words to the right people, unless Judah found a way to fight back. The next morning arrived with deceptive calm. Judah loaded supplies onto his horse, while Esperanza secured Catherine's documents inside her small traveling pack. The boarding house had provided a safe night's rest, but Whitmore's watchful eyes never strayed far from their movements. They rode north toward the hidden valley as the sun climbed higher. The dusty trail wound through rocky terrain that grew increasingly remote with each passing mile. Esperanza guided them with the confidence of someone who'd traveled this path many times before. Mama always said this land chose us instead of the other way around. Her voice carried memories of a life Judah had never known existed. Catherine had found paradise while he wandered through his own personal hell. The valley opened before them like a secret kept by the mountains themselves. Green grass stretched between protective canyon walls. A clear stream ran down the center, providing everything needed for successful cattle ranching. The natural barriers would keep herds contained while offering protection from harsh weather. But something was wrong. Blackened timber marked where buildings once stood. Scattered debris told stories of recent violence. The peaceful settlement Esperanza remembered had been transformed into a scene of destruction. She slipped from her horse and ran toward the burned remains. Her small feet carried her past the ruined barn toward what had been their home. Only the stone foundation remained standing like broken teeth. Judah followed more cautiously. His experienced eyes read the signs of deliberate destruction. This hadn't been an accident or natural disaster. Someone had systematically burned every structure in the valley. They came at night. Esperanza knelt beside a particular pile of rubble. Her fingers traced patterns in the ash as if trying to resurrect what had been lost. Mama hid me in the root cellar when we heard the horses coming. She said to stay quiet no matter what happened. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Catherine's death hadn't been from fever alone. These men had come for something specific. When they couldn't get it, they'd eliminated the problem permanently. How many men? 4 or 5. They wore bandanas over their faces. Judah examined the ground around the ruins. Boot prints told their own story. Heavy men with expensive footwear, not common drifters or cattle rustlers. These were hired professionals. Esperanza moved toward a large oak tree that had somehow survived the flames. She pressed her small hands against its trunk and pushed. A section of bark swung inward on hidden hinges. Inside the hollow space sat a metal strongbox. Mama said this was for emergencies. The box opened to reveal more documents, financial records, and a sealed envelope marked with Judah's name in Catherine's familiar handwriting. His hands trembled as he broke the wax seal. The letter contained 3 pages of Catherine's thoughts written over several months. Her words reached across death to finally explain everything he'd never understood. She'd survived the river crossing, but lost their unborn child in the icy water. The grief had been too much to bear alongside their constant arguments about settling down. She'd let him believe she was dead rather than face the pain of their broken dreams together. The valley had provided healing and purpose. She'd built the cattle operation slowly, carefully, always hoping he might find his way back to her. Esperanza had arrived 2 years later, orphaned and alone. Catherine had claimed her as family in every way that mattered. The final paragraph stopped his breathing completely. If you're reading this, then the men who have been watching us have finally acted. I've seen them in town asking questions about my business dealings. Silas Whitmore wants this land for his own purposes. He's offered to buy me out 3 times this year. Each offer came with barely concealed threats. If something happens to me, protect our daughter. She deserves the life we never got to build together. Judah looked up to find Esperanza watching him with Catherine's same patient expression. This child represented everything good that could have grown from his marriage. Catherine had saved her because she couldn't save their own baby. What did the letter say? It said, "You're my daughter now." The words felt right leaving his lips. More right than anything had felt in 5 years of wandering. Esperanza smiled for the first time since he'd met her. The expression transformed her entire face from serious, beyond her years, to genuinely childlike. Mama said you might say that someday. They spent the rest of the afternoon gathering evidence from the ruins. Financial records proved Catherine's legitimate ownership of vast cattle herds sold through proper markets. Bank correspondence showed regular deposits from respectable buyers. Everything had been legal, profitable, and thoroughly documented. But one discovery changed everything. Hidden beneath loose floorboards in what had been Catherine's bedroom, they found a small journal. The final entries detailed Whitmore's escalating pressure tactics, threats disguised as business propositions, warnings about what happened to stubborn people who refused reasonable offers. The last entry was dated just days before Catherine's death. Whitmore's men followed me to the valley today. They know where we live now. If something happens, the evidence is in the oak tree. Tell Judah I never stopped loving him. Tell him our daughter needs him to be the man I always knew he could become. Judah closed the journal with deadly certainty. Catherine hadn't died from fever. She'd been murdered for refusing to surrender her land to a greedy banker who decided to take what he couldn't buy. The setting sun painted the destroyed valley in shades of blood and gold. Tomorrow they'd return to Millfield Creek armed with proof of Whitmore's crimes. Tonight they'd honor Catherine's memory by planning justice for her death. Esperanza built a small fire from unburned wood. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching flames dance against the darkening sky. Father and daughter by choice rather than blood, united by love for the remarkable woman who'd brought them together. They returned to Millfield Creek with evidence that could destroy Whitmore's carefully constructed empire. Judah carried Catherine's journal pressed against his chest like armor. Esperanza rode beside him with the determination of someone far older than her 8 years. The town buzzed with nervous energy. Word had spread about the rich orphan and her mysterious guardian. Shopkeepers whispered behind cupped hands. Children pointed from doorways. Everyone sensed that change was coming whether they wanted it or not. Judah's first stop was the telegraph office. He needed to contact the territorial marshal in Phoenix. Federal authorities would investigate crimes that local officials might ignore or cover up. The telegraph operator, a thin man with ink-stained fingers, read the message with growing alarm. "You sure you want to send this? It's making some serious accusations against important people. Send it exactly as written." The operator's key tapped out the urgent message. "Request immediate investigation. Murder and land fraud. Evidence available. Come prepared for resistance from local authorities." Next came the harder task, finding witnesses willing to testify against the most powerful man in town. The first breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Maria Santos ran a small restaurant that catered to traveling cattlemen. She'd served meals to buyers who dealt with Catherine's operation for years. That woman was sharp as a tack, always paid her bills in cash, never caused trouble for anybody. Maria's weathered hands kneaded bread dough while she talked. Her voice carried the authority of someone who'd seen enough of life to recognize truth when it appeared. Men came through here last month asking questions about her, wanted to know about her business dealings, offered money for information. "What did you tell them?" "Nothing. I don't take money for gossip." But others had been less principled. The blacksmith admitted accepting $20 to describe Catherine's visits to town. The stable owner had provided details about her travel patterns for similar payment. Whitmore had been planning her murder for weeks. The banker himself appeared outside Maria's restaurant as Judah finished interviewing her. His expensive suit looked out of place on the dusty street. His smile carried the cold calculation of a snake preparing to strike. "I hear you've been asking questions around town. Perhaps we should discuss your concerns privately." "Nothing private about murder." Whitmore's expression never changed, but his pale eyes hardened like winter ice. "Careful with your accusations, stranger. This town doesn't appreciate troublemakers spreading lies about respected citizens." 3 men emerged from the shadows behind him. Large men with calloused hands and weapons worn from frequent use. They moved with the practiced coordination of professionals who'd worked together many times before. Judah recognized the boot prints he'd seen in the burned valley. "Esperanza, stay close to Maria." The girl pressed herself against the restaurant owner's protective bulk. Maria's own eyes flashed with understanding. She'd raised 6 children and buried 2 husbands. She knew dangerous men when she saw them. "You boys want some coffee? Fresh pot just finished brewing." Her offer diffused the immediate tension. Even hired killers had to maintain appearances on a busy street in broad daylight. Too many witnesses watched from nearby doorways. Whitmore's smile returned, but it never reached his eyes. "Think carefully about your next moves, stranger. This town has ways of dealing with people who don't understand their place." The banker and his men retreated toward the main street, but their message had been delivered with perfect clarity. Stop investigating or face the consequences. That evening brought an unexpected ally. Sheriff Reynolds appeared at their boarding house room with a bottle of whiskey and a guilty conscience. "I've been wearing this badge for 15 years. Never had to compromise my principles until Whitmore started running things." The sheriff's confession tumbled out like water through a broken dam. Whitmore controlled too much of the town's economy to oppose directly. Honest lawmen who asked inconvenient questions found themselves facing trumped-up charges or mysterious accidents. But murdering women crosses a line I won't tolerate. If you've got real evidence, I'll back your play. Judah showed him Catherine's journal. The sheriff read each entry with growing anger. By the final page, his jaw was set like granite. I knew something was wrong when those strangers left town so quickly after the fire reports came in. Whitmore said they were investors looking at property deals. They were killers cleaning up loose ends. Can you prove it? Esperanza spoke from her corner chair where she'd been quietly listening. I saw their faces when they took off their bandanas. I remember everything. The sheriff studied her with new respect. Children's testimony rarely carried weight in territorial courts, but her obvious intelligence and detailed memory might be enough to support the physical evidence. The territorial judge arrives next week for regular court sessions. If we can present a solid case, he'll have to investigate. But Whitmore wasn't planning to wait for official justice. The boarding house window exploded inward as a rock crashed through the glass. Attached was a simple message written in block letters. Leave town by sunrise or join your wife. Judah crumpled the paper in his fist. They'd pushed too hard too fast. Whitmore felt cornered and desperate men made dangerous decisions. We need somewhere safe to wait for the marshal. Sheriff Reynolds stood and checked his weapon. My office has thick walls and plenty of ammunition, but if we're making a stand, we better be ready for whatever they throw at us. Outside, the sound of gathering footsteps echoed through the darkness. The territorial marshal arrived at dawn with 2 federal deputies and a warrant for Silas Whitmore's arrest. Marshal Crawford was a weathered man who'd spent 20 years cleaning up corruption in frontier towns. His reputation for fairness had reached even the remote settlements. The courthouse filled beyond capacity by 8 in the morning. Every seat was taken. People stood along the walls and spilled out onto the street. Word had spread through the territory that justice was finally coming to Millfield Creek. Judge Harrison presided from behind a massive oak desk that dominated the small courtroom. His gray beard and steel-rimmed spectacles gave him the appearance of an Old Testament prophet. He'd overseen hundreds of territorial cases and recognized the importance of this one immediately. Whitmore sat at the defendant's table, flanked by 2 expensive lawyers from Phoenix. His confident demeanor suggested a man who believed money could solve any problem. He'd bought his way out of trouble before and expected to do so again, but this time felt different. Marshal Crawford presented the evidence methodically. Catherine's journal entries detailing Whitmore's escalating threats, financial records proving her legitimate business operations, witness testimony from cattle buyers who dealt with her for years. The burned settlement photographs spoke louder than words. Systematic destruction designed to eliminate evidence and intimidate survivors. Then Esperanza took the witness stand. The courtroom fell silent as the small girl raised her right hand to swear the oath. Her clear voice carried to every corner of the packed room. She wore a simple blue dress that Maria Santos had sewn for the occasion, but her dignity transformed her into something far more powerful than her 8 years suggested. Judge Harrison leaned forward with grandfatherly kindness. Tell us what you remember about the night your mama died. Esperanza's testimony unfolded with devastating precision. She described hiding in the root cellar while strange men searched their home, the smell of smoke, her mama's final words about finding Judah if anything happened. How many men were there? 4. They wore bandanas at first but took them off when they thought nobody could see. Can you identify any of them? Esperanza pointed directly at Whitmore's table, not at the banker himself, but at 2 men sitting in the front row behind him. Those 2, the big one with the scar and the skinny one with yellow teeth. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Everyone recognized the men as Whitmore's regular employees. They'd been seen around town for months doing various jobs that required muscle more than skill. Whitmore's lead lawyer objected immediately. Your Honor, this child's testimony is unreliable. The trauma of losing her mother could easily cause false memories or mistaken identities. Judge Harrison studied Esperanza carefully. Her composure under pressure impressed even the skeptical observers. She answered each question with unwavering consistency. "Young lady, are you absolutely certain about what you saw?" "Yes, sir. Mama always taught me to pay attention to faces. She said remembering people was important for staying safe." The judge made notes in his ledger. Child witnesses were rare in territorial courts, but this one demonstrated unusual credibility. Sheriff Reynolds testified next. He described the suspicious departure of unknown men immediately after reports of the Valley fire. Whitmore's claimed ignorance about their identities despite providing them with rooms and supplies. The timeline painted a damning picture. The same men who'd questioned townspeople about Catherine's business had left town within hours of her reported death. Whitmore finally took the stand in his own defense. His lawyers had coached him well. He expressed sympathy for the tragic loss of life while maintaining complete innocence of any wrongdoing. His interest in Catherine's property had been purely business-related. Legitimate offers to purchase valuable grazing land. "I'm a businessman, Your Honor. I identify opportunities and make fair offers. If people choose not to sell, I respect their decisions and move on." But Marshall Crawford's cross-examination revealed cracks in the polished facade. Financial records showed Whitmore borrowing heavily against future land acquisitions. He'd promised investors access to Catherine's prime grazing areas months before her death. The deals only made sense if he'd been certain of acquiring the property one way or another. How could you guarantee investors access to land you didn't own? Whitmore's confident demeanor faltered slightly. "I believe the owner would eventually see reason and accept a fair offer, even after she'd rejected your proposals multiple times. Business negotiations often require patience and persistence." The marshal produced correspondence between Whitmore and his Phoenix investors. Letters promising delivery of specific land parcels by definite dates. Contracts that would bankrupt him if Catherine refused to sell. "You were gambling everything on acquiring her property. What would have happened to your business if she'd continued refusing?" Whitmore's expensive lawyers objected repeatedly, but the damage was accumulating. Their client had painted himself into a corner where Catherine's death became his only path to financial survival. The final blow came from an unexpected source. One of Whitmore's own hired men, faced with murder charges and a potential hanging, decided to save his own neck. He confessed to participating in the Valley raid but claimed he'd only expected intimidation, not killing. Whitmore said, "We were going to scare her into selling, make her understand she couldn't stay in business without his protection." The confession detailed how the intimidation had escalated when Catherine fought back. She'd threatened to expose Whitmore's criminal methods to territorial authorities. The situation had spiraled beyond anyone's control. Judge Harrison called for a recess to consider the evidence. The courtroom buzzed with nervous energy as people debated what they'd witnessed. Esperanza sat beside Judah with the patience of someone who'd learned to trust that truth eventually surfaces. Her small hand rested in his larger one, connecting them as family regardless of what any court decided. The verdict would determine whether justice existed in frontier territories, or whether money and influence could still buy immunity from consequences. Judge Harrison returned to his bench after 2 hours of deliberation. The courtroom held its collective breath as he shuffled through his notes one final time. His weathered face revealed nothing of the decision that would reshape Millfield Creek forever. After careful consideration of all evidence presented, this court finds Silas Whitmore guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, land fraud, and intimidation of witnesses. The verdict hit like thunder in the packed room. Whitmore's face went pale as his expensive lawyers frantically shuffled papers. His hired men were also found guilty and sentenced to territorial prison. Furthermore, this court recognizes the legal inheritance of Esperanza Santos Ledger and appoints Judah Ledger as her lawful guardian until she reaches majority age. The gavel's final strike sealed their victory. Justice had prevailed despite overwhelming odds against them. Marshall Crawford placed Whitmore in shackles as the former banker's empire crumbled around him. The corrupt territorial officials who'd enabled his crimes faced their own federal investigations. Clean government would return to this corner of Arizona territory. Outside the courthouse, the town that had once rejected them now offered congratulations and apologies. The same shopkeeper who'd refused Judah service now invited him to open accounts with generous credit terms. But not everyone celebrated their victory. Some townspeople remained bitter about the changes. They'd profited from Whitmore's corrupt system and resented losing those advantages. Whispered complaints followed Judah and Esperanza down the main street. Maria Santos pushed through the crowd with tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. She embraced Esperanza like the grandmother the girl had never known. "Your mama would be so proud of you, little one, standing up to those bad men like a grown woman." Sheriff Reynolds approached with official documents declaring Esperanza's inheritance legally protected. No one could challenge her ownership again without facing federal prosecution. "What will you do now?" Judah looked down at his daughter, waiting for her thoughts. She'd proven herself wise beyond her years throughout their ordeal. "We're going home, to the valley." The next month brought transformation to their lives that bordered on miraculous. Judah hired honest workers to rebuild the settlement Catherine had created. The main house rose from its ashes stronger than before. New barns and corrals expanded the operation's capacity. Esperanza threw herself into learning every aspect of cattle ranching. She rode alongside the cowboys, memorizing brands and bloodlines. Her mathematical skills impressed the foreman who taught her to calculate weights and prices. The hidden valley bloomed under their careful management. Catherine's business contacts welcomed the operation's return. Orders poured in from buyers who'd respected her reputation for quality livestock. Within weeks, Esperanza had transformed from homeless orphan to one of the territory's most successful young ranchers. But more importantly, she'd found the family Catherine had promised would someday care for her. Judah discovered purpose he'd never imagined possible. Protecting and teaching, Esperanza filled the empty spaces in his heart that years of wandering had carved hollow. Every day brought new opportunities to become the man Catherine had believed he could be. The town's attitude shifted as dramatically as their fortune. Shopkeepers competed for their business. The bank president personally handled their accounts. Children who'd once thrown stones now waved enthusiastically when they rode through town. Success had bought them respect that simple human decency should have provided freely. On a crisp autumn morning, they rode to the small cemetery overlooking Millfield Creek. A new headstone marked Catherine's grave with words that honored her courage and wisdom. Fresh wildflowers brightened the carefully tended plot. Esperanza placed Catherine's locket on the marble surface. "She said to give this back when I found my real family." But Judah gently returned the silver chain to her neck. "She wanted you to keep it, to remember that love doesn't end with death." The inscription inside had been their wedding vow. Two hearts joined forever. Catherine had fulfilled that promise by bringing them together across impossible circumstances. They stood in comfortable silence while the morning sun painted the valley gold below them. Father and daughter by choice rather than blood, united by the remarkable woman who'd saved them both. "What would you like to do today?" Esperanza's eyes sparkled with the mischief of a normal 8-year-old finally allowed to be a child. "Can we check on the new calves? And maybe ride to the far pasture to see how the grass is growing?" Her enthusiasm for ranch work amazed everyone who met her. She'd inherited Catherine's natural business instincts, along with her fierce determination to succeed despite any obstacles. As they rode back toward their rebuilt home, Judah reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. A chance encounter in a dusty alley had restored everything he'd thought lost forever. The lonely cowboy had found not just his past, but his future. The valley stretched before them like a promise kept. Cattle grazed peacefully in meadows where violence had once threatened to destroy everything good. The clear stream reflected afternoon clouds that drifted toward distant mountains. Esperanza guided her horse with the confidence of someone who belonged exactly where she was. The frightened girl clutching a mysterious locket had become a young woman ready to build her own legacy. Their story had started with loss and separation. It ended with family and belonging. Sometimes the longest journeys led exactly where they needed to go. The silver locket caught sunlight as they rode toward home together.